members. Dr. Richard Hiskis got his Bachelor of Arts degree from Hope College and his MA and PhD in political science from Indiana University. He is a professor emeritus in political science and human rights from the University of Connecticut. And he is retired from Grand Valley State University. Dr. Hiskis began human rights programs at both institutions. And when he left UConn, the program there in human rights was the largest program in the world. GVSU's human rights program is also growing at this time. Dr. Hiskis was also the editor of the Journal for Human Rights from 2006 to 2013. And his book, The Human Rights to a Green Future, Environmental Rights and Intergenerational Justice, 2010, won the award for the best book in human rights by the American Political Science Association. So, Dr. Hiskis, we're anxious and looking forward to this presentation.
Thanks, Carol. And thank you too, Kim. It's a real pleasure to be here today. Thank you all for coming. I know it's all in anticipation of another presidential impeachment starting in a few hours. I promise to have you out in time to watch every minute of that, although it sort of seems like a rerun to me, but I'll leave that up to you. Yeah, I'm gonna start for a little bit, and then I'd like to have a little bit of back and forth with you about the idea of denial and what's been going on in this country before I really get started on this talk. I wrote this piece it came out in a book that came out last year, edited by a friend of mine, called Why Human Rights Still Matter in Global Politics and Global Affairs. What I'm going to focus on primarily is official government policies that deny the reality of climate change and what the harmful effect of those policies are, who they harm, and why they harm those people's human rights, specifically their environmental human rights. Also, we're going to talk about what I take to be the opposite of official denial, which is official apologies, which have been part of international politics for about 100 years. I'll give you a few examples of those. They're both very much a part of the international world of politics and policy, but they're also recognizable today, both denial and apology, in our national and local politics. And really, both denial and apology are part of our everyday lives, the relationships we have with other people. And I want to explore those a little bit because what you and I experience as an apology is really very much what the world of international politics experiences as official apologies, and why they might matter, why they might be important, or why they might not really be as effective as governments want them to be. And the same is true with denial. We all have experienced people denying things that we think ought not to be denied. And I'd like to start with that, because after I told Carol that I'd do this talk, I just started thinking about what an amazing year we've had in so many ways. I mean, it's really been an annus horribilis, a horrible year that has been characterized by lots of pain and suffering, but also by a lot of denial. Let's talk about that for a couple of minutes. What's been denied this year, in the past year, by government officials at all levels, and increasingly by citizens too? I mean, I'll say climate change because that's what we're going to talk about, but what else? What other kinds of denials have there been? And just say it out loud. I'd like to hear. Deborah.
Wearing masks. Back in March, I was flying, and March of last year, and I looked and it said, you don't need to wear a mask. That's not necessary. And boy, was that a bad call at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's one that really is, hits us on the ground, doesn't it? People denying that masks are necessary. What's the larger denial of that? particular thing.
The COVID even exists.
That the pandemic is even happening. That denial, it surprises me it's still going on. Sharon?
Yes, I was going to say, yes, it's still going on, and there's still people that are saying it's not so bad. It's just the flu.
Who's denied the pandemic? I mean, who are we talking about here?
Former president.
Well,
I'm
I
sorry?
think,
Michael?
yeah, I think that there's a lot of denial because of political feelings and economic feelings that people are denying the existence of COVID because they want to open the economy, and it hurts their cause to say that people should be staying home or they should be sheltering. You know, and you see that in the United States, different states taking different approaches to that. But
That's a good point. I was going to ask in a minute, why are these denials being made? What does it all mean? But I think that's a good example. President Trump has denied the pandemic for a long time, even though we now know that very early on he knew that it was very, very serious. It's plausible that he denied it for a long time for the reason he said, because he didn't want to panic people. That certainly would be in the sort of Franklin Delano Roosevelt mode of denial. To make people not worry about World War II. But for whatever reason, that's a pretty big denial. What else in this past year has been denied? Even officially and also amongst our friends and, associates.
Certainly the election outcome was denied.
Well,
by
the
many.
election. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, that's kind of a biggie that we denied, that many people denied. Some are still denying that the electoral outcome. It's kind of interesting that, if a lot of the people doing the denying are saying only the presidential part of the election was rigged, not the rest of the ballot. I don't know how you would do that. Republicans had an extraordinarily successful election year, seems to me. They won at every level, except the presidential level. That, to me, as a political scientist, and I know that there's very little fraud in any election, really. But that shows me that people are very consciously splitting their ticket. They wanted Republicans and they voted for a different president. Anything else that's
well,
big enough?
that's just as part of what was just mentioned, the election. I mean, there was denial that it was even possible to have an election with mail-in ballots and having more people participate, and that there could be a fair election without fraud if you could, there's ways to do things that some people denied were even possible.
Yeah, I think we'll all get better. All the states in the country as a whole will get better at doing mail-in ballots by the next election. It's what some states have been doing for 50 years. All right, so anything else? Any other big denial? I think there's one other.
Well, denial about racism. And inequality in our society.
Right. Thanks, Helen. I think that's a really important one too. And it keeps getting raised, right? In various ways, sometimes to defend what happened on January 6th. Well, Black Lives Matter was much worse and all those things, but a general rejection of the reality of systematic institutionalized racism in this country. Now, I'm not going to talk about all those things today, but they're interestingly related to what we are going to talk about. I think there's a couple of late entries into the denial game here too. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia has been too much with us, I think, in the last few weeks. She is well known for her denying that the 9/11 attack on the Pentagon actually happened.
And Sandy Hook as well, which is
Sandy Hook. I was in Connecticut when Sandy Hook happened. I knew those people. Believe me, it happened. Parkland too. She denied that natural causes are starting the California fires. This was my favorite, that it's Jewish space lasers that are starting fires. So I don't want to step on anybody's ideas here, but I mean, that's a lot of denial. That's a whole festival of denial that we've been seeing in our life and in our politics. Very few, if any, apologies, by the way. It hasn't been a year full of apologies. We had a president who always said it in his biography too, which I read, that he makes it a practice never, ever, ever to apologize for anything, because it makes it look like weakness. And as a president, he's one of the few presidents in the past 50 years who hasn't issued some kind of official apology for something. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But so what's the effect of all these denials? I mean, what's the effect of denying the pandemic? We know, right? Here we are on Zoom
We're not
instead
New
of being in
Zealand
each other's
because we
presence.
deny.
A lot of sickness, a lot of suffering, certainly is part of that. What's the effect of continuing to deny institutionalized racism? Well, it continues, continued injustice. What's the effect of continuing to deny the election?
People are less trustful of government, and it just widens the split. This partisan split is just out of control.
I think it's a real threat to democracy to not believe that elections are fair. I mean, there's very little else that democracy has to offer that must be believed in for it to work. You know, when Lincoln was in the middle of the Civil War, he adamantly insisted that democracy could no longer work if the minority could just leave. And if you think about it, that's true. If the minority leaves, then democracy simply cannot work. And I think it's that fundamental that we must have faith in elections or democracy's in real trouble. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I think that there's something that all these denials have in common. And it's hard to come up with what that is, and you might want to comment on it too, but I think that all these denials end up violating some of our rights, violating some of our specific rights. And I want to look specifically at how climate change denial violates a particular right, but denying the pandemic threatens our right to health, maybe to our right to health care. Denying systematic racism denies our right to equal treatment, although I usually like to call that the right to treatment as an equal. Right to equal treatment sounds like we have to treat everybody the same and everybody's different. Just like when your mother used to say, when you complained that she loved one of your siblings better, she said, no, I love you all the same, but you're different, so I treat you differently. The right to equal treatment, I think, and equal dignity is a right that's violated by refusing to accept the continuance of racism in this country. And I think there's a right to democracy. I think that there is a human right to democracy that is threatened if we simply refuse to accept the results of elections. So I'm going to talk specifically about climate change denial, but I want you to think about how this really isn't that much different than the other kind of denials that we've been talking about. I'm going to talk about I'm going to make an argument in 3 parts that official climate change denial constitutes a human rights violation because it violates the environmental human rights of future generations. So that's pretty abstract. Climate change denial violates a specific human right, the human right to clean air, water, and soil. That's what environmental human rights mean in my judgment. And it violates those rights as they are held by future people. But because I'm also going to argue that the fact that environmental human rights have to logically exist for future people, we also get them too. So it violates our rights. How does climate change denial do that? How does it violate human rights? Because it delays and therefore debilitates efforts necessary to protect the environment. The longer we deny that climate change is real, the more our efforts to stop it, to ameliorate the harm of climate change, the more it will be delayed, and that will debilitate our efforts and lead to even greater harm. So that's broadly what I want to argue, that climate change denial, when it's made by official governments, causes real harm. It causes harm that violates human rights. So 3 forms of the argument. I'm mostly going to elaborate on the second one, but there's a couple other aspects of it that are interesting, I think. First of all, climate change denial, like Holocaust denial or genocide denial, which is an area of denial that people may know something about. In the legal code of several countries, constitutes a special kind of crime. So in some countries like Spain and France and Germany and Rwanda and Israel, denying the Holocaust or denying a genocide, as in Rwanda, is a crime that you can go to jail for. It's a special kind of crime. Lawyers say it's called an inchoate crime. What that means is it's a crime in speech itself. It doesn't matter if somebody listening to you denying the Holocaust then goes out and does something that hurts someone. That often happens. But the idea of inchoate crimes, it doesn't matter what the consequences are. Saying it itself is a crime. In the United States, we typically call these incitement crimes. In fact, later on today, the Senate is going to debate whether it's possible that the President of the United States committed a crime of incitement by giving speeches. He didn't lead a crowd into the insurrection on January 6th, but he gave speeches. Is that a crime? Well, in the United States legal code, yes. There's other kinds we call hate speech, but basically incitement or hate speech are analogous inchoate crimes to denial, crimes of denial. So what that means is then, first of all, is that as a crime of incitement, denial is not protected speech. It's not a free speech issue. Hate speech is not considered to be free speech. It is considered to be a crime. Now we could debate that. It's interesting. So that means that it's a false equivalence to say, well, it's okay we're just hearing both sides. We're just hearing both sides. In hate speech or incitement speech, it's not assumed that there are 2 sides to this. One is criminal speech. So that when it comes to Holocaust denial, for instance, it's a crime to deny it in speech because it re-victimizes the people who were victims in the first place or whose family members were victims. It causes harm. So in climate change denial, the incitement lies in the false claim that scientific facts have 2 sides. We hear that sometimes. Well, there's 2 sides to climate change. Maybe it's true. Some people think it is, some people think it isn't. That's not the way science works. There might be some scientists in the audience today. Science doesn't work that way. When there's a new scientific issue, there might be 3, 4, or a dozen different theories about whether something is real or what caused it. But by the time the scientists do the experiments and come together and decide, yes, there really is something called gravity, or there really is something called climate change or evolution or whatever it is, there's not 2 sides anymore from the scientific point of view. There's simply accepted scientific fact. So speech then is not protected against that because it causes damage to the truth, to what's real. So that's the first sort of broad argument against climate change denial. The second aspect I'm going to do is compare climate change denial to its opposite, which I would call an apology. We'll get to that in a minute. Apologies as policy carry with them several interesting and positive aspects affecting the future, especially if they include reparations. So for instance, when President Wilson apologizes to Colombia, during the nation of Colombia, for collateral damage done to the Colombian state while we were sort of annexing Panama, he asked Congress to legislate reparations to the nation of Colombia as part of the apology. And when someone apologizes to us, we usually want reparations too. Denial embraces exactly the opposite thing, the negative aspects affecting the future in disastrous, moral, and specifically unjust ways. And this is the one I'm going to spend most of our time with. The third general approach to looking at climate change is also looking at a couple of important national court cases. One was in the Netherlands, the other one is in the United States. The one in the United States was just finally decided last year. It's a case in which 21 children, ranging in age from 6 to 21 or to 17, and one lawyer representing future generations, sued the United States government for destroying the climate for future generations by continuing its reliance on fossil fuels. This case is called the Juliana case, Juliana versus the United States. And it was finally decided last year. It won at the federal court level. It went to the appeals court 3 years ago. The appeals court twice dealt with petitions by the US government that went to the Supreme Court to just dismiss the case as ridiculous. The Supreme Court refused to do that, sent it back to the appeals court, and last year it lost on a 2-to-1 vote. There's three judges in appellate court cases. But what's interesting is that the dissenting opinion is probably the most important aspect of this case, written by a woman judge on Judge Stanton. And most legal experts say her dissent was so brilliant that it's going to form, it's going to form a case for many more cases when they're brought to the US, and that those cases have already been brought. And what she argues is two things: that children and future generations must be given standing. In other words, they are allowed to sue the federal government for the first time. And she says that deciding against them violates an important principle, which is very important from the standpoint of environmentalism. It's the principle underlying all constitutional governments, which is, it's called the perpetuity principle. That the Constitution presumes that the government must act as if our country will exist in perpetuity. Lincoln first introduced this idea during his first inaugural address, and he was arguing against letting the country divide up into two different countries. But the judge here says that by embracing self-destructive policies, like policies that lead to climate change, the United States, by relying on fossil fuels, the government is consciously embracing the eventual destruction of our country. It's a very interesting argument, and we can talk about it in the Q&A if there's time. But all of these approaches presume something that I've been arguing for 15 years, that environmental human rights are real, that they are part of our 40 or so human rights that have been listed in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was largely written by Eleanor Roosevelt after World War II. It has formed the basis of international law since 1948, and does not include the right to a safe environment. But I've been arguing for this. And I want to talk a little bit about what environmental human rights are and why they are threatened by climate change denial. And then I also want to talk a little bit about apologies. Let me stop though and ask if there's anybody has any questions so far. Anybody with me so far? Okay, all right. So let me say a few things about what environmental human rights look like: the right to clean air, water, and soil. First of all, these are rights that belong to groups as well as to individuals. And in fact, the way I conceptualize environmental human rights, they first belong to a fairly abstract group, the group of future people. They don't exist yet, so that's pretty abstract. Although in my next book, I argue that children should be seen as the living future generation, the first future generation, and they're real. So I end up arguing there that the most fundamental right that children have is their environmental right to a safe and healthy environment. So the group right, can groups have rights? Does that make sense to you? Do groups have rights?
Sure, they ought to have rights.
What kind of groups? What are we talking about here?
Well, I mean, we have recognized rights for the slaves we used to beat and enforce, and they now have a, race discrimination right to bring lawsuits, although that's being minimized by the latest Supreme Court findings.
What's controversial though, isn't it? I mean, part of the group right that Black Americans have, it's argued, entitles them to reparations. That's pretty controversial.
Indeed.
Any other groups that you can think of that have right to? Black Lives Matter, though, you're right, Tom. Black Lives Matter movement is about the group right of Black Americans. And it's controversial, isn't it? We live in an individualistic society. Do we really believe that belonging to this group gives you a particular right that white people don't have?
It seems to me that part of the problem is that those groups have been denied rights, and that's why there are pushes to give them rights, as opposed, so if they hadn't been denied those rights, they might not even be recognized as a group at this point.
All right, that's very important, Helen. That's very important in understanding genocide. And it's also important, I would argue, in recognizing why climate change denial is so bad. I'm going to argue that when we deny climate change, we are not recognizing future people as real, as being equal to us. In the same way that denying group rights that belong to Black Americans, Black Lives Matter would say, you are denying something that other Americans have. You're not treating us equally.
Well,
Yeah,
Native American, the
sorry,
group
Carol?
of Native Americans.
Native Americans too.
And now with the Keystone XL, I mean, that's just right in the news again.
But it's tough for us to accept this, right? I mean, our history as a nation is a history of abusing the rights of Native Americans. If we gave them rights as a group, we've certainly abused them. Any other groups that we claim have rights?
The disability community.
Disability community, okay.
Well, and women who were denied rights for so long.
So everybody's pretty comfortable with this idea of group rights. Well, what about corporations? They're a group. Do they have rights?
Citizens United gives them the right of some kind. I don't know if it's a true right.
Well, on the right, Hobby Lobby was granted the right as a group not to carry out a federal policy. Today, Dominion, as a huge international corporation, is claiming the right to be protected from slander by Rudy Giuliani, and by the Fox News Network. So there are examples of group rights. So maybe we don't need to worry about the fact that environmental rights are group rights. I would say that the embrace of the idea that group rights are real goes back to Winston Churchill during World War II. One of the many famous things Churchill said during World War II is this. He said, "The Nazis appear to be committing a crime for which there is no name." So what was that crime? The Nazis appear to be committing a crime for which there is no name. It wasn't waging war. Wasn't considered a crime.
No, genocide.
Genocide. How that word was invented is an interesting story in itself. I don't have time to tell it here, but a Polish lawyer named Raphael Lemkin coined the term, and Webster's dictionary immediately put it into the dictionary. And it's kind of an interesting political story. But so what is genocide? What are we talking about? I mean, this genocide, like many genocides, and there have been a lot of them, sorry to say, in the 20th century, took place during wartime. Is war genocide? Killing lots of people too.
Getting rid of specific groups. Getting rid of specific groups.
Based on what?
Based on some characteristic, some race or religion or some characteristic that the rest of the groups don't like, I guess. I don't know.
Now, how's that different than getting rid of as many Germans as possible during the Second World War?
We protect such groups. We don't protect them in war. We can go in Iraq and kill all the collateral damage we want, and there's no war crime. At least the U.S. position is there's no war crime.
Well, no, there are war crime tribunals, and the United States has admitted to some war crimes, as other countries have. But what's the difference?
I think
between
genocide, you're
I'm
trying
sorry,
to
Michael?
eliminate, you're trying to eliminate an entire group of people, every one of them. And we were talking about future generations with regard to environment. You're probably trying to eliminate all future generations of that group.
Michael, you're making my argument too quickly. Just hold on for a minute. I'm not going to quite go that far. But
Okay.
the question to ask, of course, is what's the difference between genocide and 6 million murders? What's the difference? Why is it an important difference?
You're targeting a particular
That's
race.
right,
or group.
Yeah.
That's right. The definition of genocide provided by Raphael Lemkin, and it's incorporated into the UN Convention Against Genocide in 1948, says that genocide is different from murder in the sense that it is a systematic and planned effort to exterminate a group of people based on a group characteristic, race, ethnicity, whatever it is. So you seem to be willing to accept the idea that genocide as a group phenomenon is real.
Rich,
So should there be a right to be protected from genocide?
I would hope there'd be a right.
Okay.
So if there is a right, what is that? What is it? It's not the right to life exactly. Nobody would deny the right to life as the most fundamental human right. So why do we need a right not to be a victim of genocide if we already have a right to life? The answer, of course, is we're talking about the right to existence of a group, not of an individual. And that becomes a very important part of understanding how it is that we can talk about other groups of people, including maybe the group of all future people that can be said to have a right. If we would recognize if somebody declared it was time to have a genocide against all people of Dutch ancestry, then that would pretty much affect me and probably most of the people on this call, right? So then we would understand what that means. But it seems like you have a pretty clear understanding of that. Most of my students have more difficult time understanding how rights can attach to groups, not just individuals. So that's the first aspect of environmental rights. Secondly, I call them emergent rights. That means they're new. Partly it means they're new. And it means that they emerge from human relationships, from collective action. They emerge at the group level. It's a group phenomenon. Even the group acquisition of knowledge. I mean, if there's a right to be protected from climate change, we had to collect a lot of knowledge, had to come together to understand what climate change is for this right to appear. And it means that environmental rights, for the most part, belong to future people because that's where the harm is. I want to make sure we get this point. We know what it's like to live with environmental risks, right? We know that. We know that it's risky out there. We know secondhand smoke, pollution. In Michigan, we really know about polluted water. We get that. That's risky. Is there a right to be protected from risk? That's a different question. I mean, most of American culture and economics is based on embracing risk, right? That's what capitalism means. You risk a little bit and you make benefit. I'm not going to argue that we have a right to be protected from risk, even though psychologically risk can be harmful. What I want to say is that we do have a right. All rights are about being protected from harm. That's what rights are for. They protect us from harm that is wrong that we suffer. So where's the harm when it comes to environmental risks? The harm is in the future. That's where the harm is. We live there with the risk. But if we don't do anything, if we let climate change continue, if we allow our environmental depredations to just continue and go on unchecked, people who come after us are going to suffer serious harm. In fact, this always shocks me when I read this. A UN special rapporteur, a special scholar, to write, made a report to the UN about the harm to children about environmental change, climate change. And he made this remarkable statement. He said, today, right now, in every country on earth, children are being born pre-polluted. What a statement. They're being born pre-polluted. They already have organ damage because of the exposure to environmental toxins that come through, the mother's body. Isn't that a remarkable statement? That children are being born pre-polluted? So that's where you really see that there's harm coming from climate change. And future generations are really going to be living with a storm of horrible impact. And if you don't believe it, just look at these little babies that are being born already pre-polluted. So environmental rights, in some ways, I think, are the model for all rights. They're about harms. Also, environmental rights are very future-oriented things. I keep saying, that it's about future generations having rights. But really, all rights are future-oriented things, aren't they? All rights are kind of guarantees or promises that you can say this, you can do this, you can do these things, you have the right to the freedom to do these things. Those are guarantees for us. That's what rights are. They're guarantees, promises. And so environmental rights affect the future first because that's where the harms are. And those children being born and the rest of the future generation need us to guarantee their rights, need us to protect them. And if it helps you to see it by seeing, the concrete harm that babies manifest when they're born today, that makes it a little less abstract. One of my favorite statements about this is that the official American spokesman for rights, I would say, is Thomas Jefferson. Wrote the Bill of Rights, insisted on the Bill of Rights. He was a farmer in Virginia. I know he had slaves. My screen just collapsed. Can anybody still see me?
Yeah, I can, Richard. Hold
We
on a
see
second,
you.
I'll fix
I
that.
don't think anything's wrong on our end.
No,
It says I'm viewing Milt Newsma's screen. Newt, are you there?
I've got it. I
It's
got
a
it.
shared
You're back.
screen, yeah.
Now the Haas virtual classroom has popped up.
All right. Good to
There's a
see you.
tape
Newt.
delay.
Milt.
Oh, you're back.
All right. So I don't know, Jefferson said something once that's very interesting in a letter he wrote to James Madison, his friend. They were talking about rights to property and especially rights to own land. And let's just leave the slavery question aside. But Jefferson said something interesting. He said, the earth belongs in usufruct to the living. The earth belongs in usufruct to live. Anybody ever heard that term before? Usufruct, it's kind of a archaic legal term. What it
From the
means
Latin
basically-
to use up and make the fruits of.
Except in this case, what it specifically means is that the living, own the earth on a loan from the future as long as we don't mess it up. Usufruct specifically means, Tom, you're right, not to harm, not to use up everything. Jefferson was a farmer, and like a farmer, farmers always think about the future, right? The next crop, the next year, and so forth. It's interesting to me, and I think it's one of the reasons why Jefferson really understood that rights had to be guaranteed for future generations. He and his friend Tom Paine made this argument all the time. They would say every generation is equal to the one that went before in terms of rights. All right, so a couple other things about environmental rights. They reciprocally grant human rights to the living as well. And that's important because it shows that there's a part of intergenerational justice here. We can't protect the environmental rights of future generations without helping ourselves, right? If we start policies to clean air, water, and soil, in the name of the rights of future generations, we benefit too, right? The air starts to get cleaner, the water starts to get cleaner. So that's a kind of nice, consequence of this. So I think most of the people here are old enough to remember Groucho Marx. You remember the Marx Brothers? And Groucho Marx, one of his great lines was, the future? What do I care about the future? What the future's ever done for me? You know, you can just hear Groucho Marx saying that around his cigar, right? Well, the future does something for us here. We get environmental rights too. And our air and water and soil progressively get cleaner if we're intentionally focused on the environmental rights of future generations. So environmental rights, how are we doing on time here? Environmental rights are clearly at risk in climate change denial. So I want to make that clear by looking at their opposite, which I would say is an official apology. And the argument that I want to get to is that the policies that we make to protect future generations from the harm of climate change should be seen as our apology to future generations. And boy, do we owe them one, given what we've done. That's where I'm heading with this. Let's talk a little bit about apologies. I want to leave time for questions too, so we'll go through this a little bit more quickly. Official apologies, like all apologies, are an attempt to sort of repair or restore a relationship. Now think about an apology that you've made or received, or maybe you're waiting for it. So you think you deserve an apology from somebody at the moment. What do you want that apology to be? I mean, what makes an apology a good apology? Besides, I always say, any apology that has the word "if" in it, you should not accept. That's not a real apology. If somebody says, well, if I hurt your feelings, then I apologize. You know that that's not a good apology. But what else? Politicians say this all the time, right? If anyone was offended by my comments, then I'm very sorry. But what they're really saying is, if you're too sensitive or too stupid enough to be offended by this, then, you know, we know that. So what goes into a good apology?
Sincerity.
Sincerity? Okay, how do you know someone's being sincere?
I don't know, body language sometimes.
All right, but it's hard to judge the body language of a foreign government. So that's going to be a little difficult. But that's how do you know an apology is sincere? Because I think, Carol, you're right, that's the basic adjective that we're going for. So what goes into a sincere apology? What elements? What does an apologizer have to say?
I'd say they have to be able to articulate the crime that they're apologizing for.
Right, I don't know who said that, but that says several important things right there.
Deborah Williams.
Oh, okay, thank you. First of all, a good apology acknowledges that an event happened, that something happened, and that it was harmful. You hurt me, right? And that's pretty important because, you know, people bump us on the street all the time and they say sorry, and, you know, we don't think that's a real apology. We really don't care. But a real apology always presumes that we're in a relationship with someone. And that person did something that harmed us. In fact, that person probably is one of the few people that could really hurt. And that person did that. I know it sounds like your first boyfriend, but let's make it more general than that. Apologies always take place in relationships. And the first thing that you want them to include is an acknowledgement that something happened and that it was harmful. What else? Well, you want them to take responsibility.
A basic change in action in terms of you do something to prove, to show that you're apologetic. I mean, that you're apologetic.
And they want to acknowledge their part in the harm.
Yeah, so you want somebody to accept responsibility. And maybe, I think what Mike's saying is going to become very important. There has to be something tangible here. You've got to do something. You know? So that's why governments will insist on, if this is an official apology, we want some foreign aid right now. If you're serious about apologizing, you know, if Bill Clinton is seriously apologizing to Rwanda for not intervening in the genocide there, and Bill Clinton, if you remember, was really good at apologizing. I mean, his lips would quiver, and his voice would quaver a little bit, and the Rwandans aren't idiots. They said, yeah, okay, fine, we accept your apology, but it's only real if you do something, right, Mike? You have to give us something. You have to take some action to make it real. That might be reparations in a personal relationship. We wouldn't expect foreign aid. We'd say, I'll accept your apology if you take me out for dinner. You know, wash my car for a month. Then I believe you really mean it. That sounds a little venal, but that's going to become important in a minute. There has to be remorse, right? Regret. I'm sorry I did it. I'm deeply sorry I did it. And I'll say one last thing. There usually has to be a commitment not to do it again. If someone says to you, I'm really sorry I did that. I know it hurt you, but you know what? I'm probably going to do it a dozen more times. That's just not a very good apology. We want an apology that says never again, right? That's what we want, never again. So those are good aspects of an apology, but I'm going to say they only focus on the apologizer. I think a real apology also does things for the recipient of the apology that are really important. And we need to see this to understand why climate change denial needs to be apologized for. Official apologies, for instance, those that come after genocide, often acknowledge for the first time the identity of the group of victims. Genocides, while they're going on, almost always deny this. They almost always deny that there's a group that's being targeted. Like Tom said before, it has to be a group. That's what makes it genocide. So during the Rwandan genocide, we're not targeting Tutsis. We're just targeting criminals, malcontents, drug dealers. Hitler said the same thing about the Jews. We're not targeting Jews. I'm targeting inferior people. People that need to just aren't really people. In genocide, all genocides dehumanize the victims by calling them, in the Rwandan case, cockroaches. But so an official apology sometimes for the first time gives identity to the group of victims, that it really was a group that was being targeted here. So denial of a genocide almost always denies the actual existence of the group. Just like climate change denial denies the real presence and the real moral equality of future people. We can keep destroying the environment. I don't know anybody who's going to live in the future. What do I care? We deny that they are as important as us. Tom Paine famously said, every generation is equal to the one that went before. If you deny that, you're denying something fundamental, he thought, to democracy itself. Official apologies also recognize that a relationship has existed between these groups and that the relationship will exist in the future. So if the American government apologizes, gives a real apology to, say, Panama, like Wilson did, that means, and offers reparations, it means that future generations of Americans will continue that relationship with future generations of Panamanians. If a formal apology doesn't do this, a foreign government would say, don't bother. That's not really an apology. You're still going to try to dominate us in the ways that you have. So denial denies the moral equality of one group in the relationship. Here's one I think that's very important. When an apology is extended, if somebody has hurt you and is giving you a sincere apology, saying, I'm so sorry I did that. I want us to get back together. Please forgive me. How do you feel at that point? They're begging you for forgiveness. Admit it. You feel pretty good. Hey, I got some power here. I can decide whether I'm going to accept this apology or not, right? I mean, this guy really is apologizing. This person now is hanging on my every word, is hoping desperately. It's a real apology, right? It's a real apology. I feel I've got some power. I feel empowered at that moment. I know that sounds terrible. So then you can say, okay, I'll forgive you, but you got to buy me a new car. or you got to promise to clean the house for the entire next year. That does sound kind of venal. But I don't think you should see it that way. Because when someone gives us that kind of apology, it's because they use the power they have over us to hurt us. Not everybody can hurt us the way someone we love can hurt us, right? We all know that. That's an abuse of power. So it's very important that an apology empower the recipient to transfer that power, to reestablish the relationship that existed before. It may not have been an equal relationship, but it was one that we both consider to be fair. That's why reparations are so important. Why? Because talk is cheap. You really mean it, you gotta show me that you mean it. And it's gotta hurt a little bit, right? It's gonna cost something. Climate change denial saves us as a nation a ton of money. We don't have to raise taxes to help clean up the environment as long as we just keep denying that it's real. The climate, we could save a lot of money that way. We could just go off, stock market goes up, we can go back to our jobs and keep it, we can have a tax break, because who cares about the future generation? If we take the rights of future generations seriously, that empowers them to insist that we make reparations. Climate change denial allows us to get away with making those reparations by denying the equal humanity of the people who come after us. So I think we should apologize to future generations for the depredations that we brought onto our environment, that they're going to have to live in. They're going to have to live with our mess. We should apologize for that. How do we do that? Well, I'd like to see the president officially apologize, or Congress officially, just because I'm a human rights person and apologies are part of human rights policy, I'd like to see that. But that's not just what I want to see. I want to see money being spent. Those are our reparations that come with our apology. And it's going to be substantial because we've caused a lot of damage. It's going to cost a lot of money to prevent climate change from really harming the lives of future generations. They deserve it morally. But I know what you're thinking. Okay, we'll do that because we're America. We can do that. China's not going to do that. India's not going to do that. What good does it do in real terms of saving the climate if the United States and France and England and Germany, maybe a few other European countries, we spend a huge amount of money to clean up the air, but then the polluted air from China and India just floats over the rest of us, because it's going to do that. There are no borders that prevent dirty air, dirty water, dirty soil from just infecting the whole world. There's no natural borders that mirror political borders. So how do we do that? I mean, how do we get the whole world to sign on? Well, there's two ways. One is the Paris agreements, right? That we just went back to. Pretty much everybody signed the Paris agreements. They're not necessarily living up to them. China's not. India's not. They both say the same thing, which is hard to argue with. Look, all you industrialized countries, you post-industrialized countries, yeah, you caused this great mess, but now you want us to help you clean it up. We get to be an industrial country first. We get to get as wealthy as you first. Then we'll do it. Hard to argue with that. How would you argue in a way that would convince the Chinese, the Indians, the countries of Africa that are desperately trying to raise their standards of living and are willing to put aside environmental concerns in the process, at least for a while, until they can achieve, their economic independence? And they've got lots of arguments, about colonialism and all that are pretty convincing. So this is the work of human rights activists, right? And there are a lot of them. And in my forthcoming book, I talk about children human rights activists from every continent in the world who are very active today, leading human rights movements. They're not all about the environment, but a lot of them are. Some of these kids are 7 years old, 10 years old, filing lawsuits, leading marches. You all know about Greta, but Greta Thunberg, but she's actually a young adult now. I'm talking about children. They use social media to connect with human rights activists all around the world. It's quite thrilling, actually, what's being done. So there's a lot of human rights activists out there. What's the argument they have to make? And I'm going to close here by saying it's a pretty simple argument. No country can prevent climate change by itself. Every country has to participate in this. Why would they? And I would say there's two possible approaches. One is this global approach, like a big agreement, big treaty, among all by the United Nations. We know how well that typically works. Here's a different way to do it. I think there is one thing that all countries, all cultures in the world care about. In fact, I would say all cultures that ever existed, no matter how different, whether we're talking about the United States today and some rainforest tribe in the Amazon today, wildly different cultures, but they share one thing. They share one very powerful belief. And that belief could be the basis of each country in the world taking steps to protect the environment because of that belief. Anybody want to hazard a guess what that is?
Future of their children?
Yeah, that's good, Helen. I would say not just their children, but their children's children too. Every culture in the world, no matter whether it's capitalist, socialist, industrialized, prehistoric, they all care about one thing, the welfare of their own successor generations, right? I care about future Americans, don't you? I care about, I don't have any grandchildren yet, but I have hopes. I'll care about them. I don't want them to be born pre-polluted, and I don't want their kids to be born pre-polluted either. I really care about the people I know, which is my family and my town and maybe my whole country. I don't really care that much about future generations of Kenyans. Do you? I want to. Human rights are supposed to be universal. I guess I should, but I can't. But Kenyans care about their own successor generations as much as Americans can care about their own successor generations. If every nation in the world apologizes to its own inheritors, its own successor generations, for the environmental harm that it's doing and has done, and makes the reparations, it would have the same impact of a global effort, right? It would be every country in the world would be doing it. Maybe out of selfish reasons, they care about their own successor generations. Doesn't matter. It would stop climate change. And it would protect the environmental rights of every nation's future citizens. And therefore, of ours too. Let's do that. Thank you.
Okay, Richard, I have a couple questions that came in directly to me. Thanks. All right, Dave and Loretta, I think.
Well, if I could just share a moment of climate denial that I've encountered in my work for the United Soybean Board, which is comprised of soybean growers, and 80% of them are climate deniers. I was tasked with giving them input on what liability they might have from climate change, and gave
Now
them
you know you're a human rights activist, Tom.
well, I did a report that tracked all the issues. They had me on different committees. One of the problems we've got is the ocean is full of carbon. It has methane clathrates that are sitting on the continental shelf. These are now evaporating in Siberia and Alaska in little ponds, and the methane's going up and creating a feedback loop. And this feedback loop could be devastating because there's so much of this climate gas that we're freeing. Now, the Japanese are building robots to get that energy because it's just another fracking project. And because of our denial, we have not, in the last 4 years of the Trump administration, devoted any of our research dollars toward capturing that fracking methane. And the Asians are going to basically eat our lunch and save the world. And At that same meeting where I gave my report, I was followed by a climate denying keynote speaker who put a one-pager on why climate is a hoax on every chair and ranted for 30 minutes about why everything I said was just a fantasy. So this is the world in which I come from. And there are consequences to this denial. We miss opportunities.
Well, it's not just that. I mean, the other thing you said, I think is very important too, Tom, is that there are, and the Biden administration is making this case when most corporations like Ford and General Motors who've just come out saying they're going to have completely electric cars in 35 years, in 15 years. There's enormous money to be made in stopping climate change. I mean, there's a whole series of industries. There's a lot of job possibilities in a green future. And you know, I don't know what people think about what's the Democratic report? Green. What am I thinking of?
Green New Deal.
The Green New Deal. I mean, I've read that. Most people haven't read it. You should. It's only about 30 pages. It's pretty lucid, and it basically makes the case everything's related. That's all it's really saying. Is that, you know, we can talk about other things like minimum wage and all that, but basically everything's related. It all begins with climate change. The Biden administration has pretty much accepted that. We're already back in the Paris Agreement. Yesterday, the Biden administration rejoined the UN. The United States rejoined the United Nations Human Rights Council, which is good and bad. I mean, it's kind of a farce that it's always one of the worst human rights abusing countries that always chairs that council for some reason. And most of the cases it makes are against Israel. But still, it's better to be at the table than not at. So Kim, are there questions that people have launched?
Yes.
Why don't we get to some?
Okay, the first one is a House member who would like to know if you can provide the name of the judge who wrote the dissenting opinion and what appeals district that took place in. They would like to look it up to find opinions to read.
Yeah, the case is Juliana versus the United States, Julianna. The judge is, I forget her first name, I think it's Helen, but it's Staton, Staton. And I don't want to take the time to look up the case, but you could just Google Juliana case, it'll all come up.
Okay.
Including the entire opinion. The majority opinion was fairly lame. It was just straightforward law saying, "Nah, we're not gonna ever let Congress do this sort of thing." And Staton's dissent is pretty devastating in the eyes of most legal experts. And already around the world, her dissent is forming the case for a lot of other cases that are being brought in other countries. The perpetuity principle, as well as the standing of future generations and children. So I think, I don't know if we'll ever overturn it, but maybe we won't have to. I mean, if all the other corporations in Holland and Grand Rapids are like General Motors and Ford, they're already making these changes. I mean, the good news is that there's thousands of major corporations and businesses who've already dedicated themselves to the Paris Agreement. In fact, there's 1,000 in this country, there's 1,000 cities and towns and states that have declared themselves sustainability cities. Grand Rapids is one, Holland is not, and Holland needs to be. My wife is part of a group called the Holland Climate Collaborative, and they're trying to convince the town council to start making some real changes. I mean, yeah, there's a fancy new natural gas plant, but you still got coal plants too. And besides, natural gas pollutes as well. So, I mean, the good news is that so much has happened during the past 4 years, none of which happened in the White House or in Congress, but it's happened just about everywhere else to take responsibility for climate change. And that's really great news. And I would say it's because people get it, that the people who come after us matter and have rights, and we're violating them. Sorry, that was a long-winded answer to a short question. Kim, you got another one?
Yes, from Fran, is addressing climate change incompatible with a capitalistic society which is based on consumerism, especially when it is based on production of products that are not reused, which in turn pollutes our environment long-term?
Okay, that's just a little tiny question, Fran, that I'll make a completely inadequate answer to. The answer basically is yes and no. I mean, I just got done saying that there's a lot of money to be made in climate change mitigation, and I'm right. There is. Ask any of the new solar power companies that are cropping up a little bit. These people are making a lot of money. Is it bad? Is it bad for companies that pollute? Yes. I always use the example of this. You know, when automobiles came in, the people who were part of the horse industry really suffered, even down to the people who were street cleaners. That was that nice euphemism for, you know, the people who were out in the streets picking up all the horse droppings, you know, every minute, every hour of every day to make our cities livable. All those people lost their jobs. Is that a bad thing? Yeah, it is for them, unless we find other jobs for them. I think capitalism has led to horrendous exploitation of the earth. I'm not willing to say that it's fundamental to capitalism's nature that it does that. Karl Marx would say it is, and other people would say that. I don't know that it is necessarily. I do know that there's lots of capitalists who already get it, that, you know, they can do just fine if they turn their factory, you know, into something that really was not very sustainable and used up too many resources and polluted, and started making solar panels instead. And companies have done that, and they make a lot of money. So I don't think I would say in principle, I don't think that capitalism and sustainability are.
And don't you think Juliana is just one of the first cases to lose, and that like tobacco and asbestos and other things where the courts caught up with it, it's eventually going to be a train wreck of assets being transferred from companies that denied. I mean, I see that in 20 years or so, it's just going to blow up all the whole coal and oil industry.
I do think that, but it doesn't really matter what I think. General Motors thinks that. You know,
I gave all my Exxon
Ford
stock
Motor
to my
Company
church.
thinks that. You know, and so I do think that Juliana is illegal. The law always follows, you know, opinion, always. Supreme Court is a very conservative institution by design. But I do think that it won't be that long till another case comes up that succeeds, and the United States government is going to be ordered to start to do what General Motors is already doing. You got to stop relying on fossil fuels for energy.
In addition, the
Basically,
states are doing
the majority opinion just simply said the courts can't tell Congress to do that. That was the majority opinion. And the dissent was, yes, the courts can. They did that in Brown versus Board of Education, and they can do that when the perpetuation of the country is at stake. They can do that, and they will. I think you're right, Tom. They will. Another question, Kim?
Sure, from Pat. What can we do when issues like this, which have the support of the majority of the American people calling for change, when their wishes are ignored in favor of special interests?
Vote. We live in a democracy. The first thing you should do is vote. Vote for people who think that climate change is real and are willing to do something about it. I'm a political scientist. I'm biased, but I think it's not true that change is impossible. That's never true. The world is an unbelievably changed place than it was when you and I were kids. It's unbelievably. Stop saying it's impossible. It's not. It's not. Change happens constantly, and the world is so different now. If you go to, I went to California just a few years ago. I was there, and the last time I hadn't been there for a long time. The last time I was in Pasadena, I couldn't breathe the last day I was there, and you couldn't see the mountains outside the window of my hotel because of the pollution. It was just amazing. The air in California and everywhere is so much better than it was 20 years ago, and 40 years ago it was even worse. So it's possible to do this. You can become a human rights activist, an environmental activist. You could just insist that the one thing that you want from every elected official is a commitment that they'll do what it takes, they'll spend the money, they'll raise the taxes to mitigate climate change. It's possible, and everybody and every office holder knows that. Every office holder knows that if they start hearing it from their constituents, they better change their view. That's why you don't hear much climate change denial in Congress anymore. You did 10 years ago, you did. All over the place. Not now. Then there was a few years of, well, yeah, I think, you know, we are damaging the climate, but I'm not sure it's humans doing it. you know, and then Donald Trump would say, well, I think it can change back. That's one of those non-scientific facts.
10 years
But-
ago, I was sitting in DC and they had a vote of Congress. Actually, the House, Republicans included, voted on a climate change bill. And since then, we've been going backwards
Yeah,
nonstop.
but it's possible. I mean, you need to bring pressure to bear. So I think, and that's, I would argue, more important than even than changing your own personal lifestyle. I mean, that's important too. Stop using straws, you know, make sure you recycle things, but that's important. But we can't do this by ourselves. We could do it nationally. If every nation did it, it would be the solution.
I think
The solution is a systemic one, not an individual one. Yeah, Helen?
Naomi, it was Naomi Klein who wrote the book about the environment, where she talked about why people who are very conservative don't like the idea of climate being an issue because it requires concerted effort and a coordinated effort at a larger level than just local level. And that's means bigger government. And that's one of the difficulties with it.
Well, Naomi Klein, I love Naomi Klein, but she's a bomb thrower. I don't agree with everything that she says. She's pretty radical. But it is true that you can't stop climate change if you don't believe in government. It requires collective action. Collective action is why we have government, so we can act collectively, not just individually. And, you know, that does worry people. In America, that worries everybody, right? Our basic political instinct is we don't want government to get powerful enough to take away our rights or our freedoms. I mean, I get that. I've taught that for 45 years in my American political thought classes. It's important that we think that, but it's also important to recognize that there are problems that arise at the emergent collective level. You know, dirty air is a collective phenomenon, you know, and we are all complicit in it. You know, you can blame the power company down the street for your polluted air, but you're using the power. You're turning on the light switches. You're not turning the lights off. You're using power. We're all complicit in this. Stop thinking we're not. But it does require a collective decision. That's a political decision. Government has to do it, but we get to choose the government. And we still have that right to choose the people that are going to do it. That's a very fundamental democratic right. That's what ultimately protects us as individuals. Kim, you got another one?
Well, the other comments or questions that have come in have been delivered through the chat to everyone. So I don't know if Carol, you want to address those, or Richard, if you want to press your chat, open your chat option and look at those.
Yeah, the top one, Dr. Hiskis, says, I think Dr. Hiskis is confusing dealing with facts versus what is the best policy to deal with the consequences of those facts. For example, no sane, logical person will deny that automobiles kill many people, but logical, rational people should not be forced as a result of this fact to ban all cars. So that was the first.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that one.
You're not seeing it?
Well, oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
No, but logical, rational people, Bill, might accept seatbelts, might accept all the myriad of safety devices that are on automobiles today. It's amazing. I haven't bought a new car in a number of years, but I've looked at them and it's just amazing the safety devices that are on them.
Well, the next big safety thing will be they drive themselves and don't text while they drive or get drunk.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, but basically, I don't think a sane, logical person would want cars to be Model Ts anymore. Where do all those safety devices come from? Well, mostly they're innovations that then are mandated by government. You know, that you cannot buy a car without seatbelts anymore.
I would say they're
Against
mandated
the law,
by
and it's against the law
liability
not to-
lawyers, but that's part of government, I guess.
Well, so I mean, we use government to make those laws that protect us all. And a good example we're living with right now is masks. Is wearing a mask a violation of your individual liberty? Some people would say, yes, I don't like wearing them. The people who refuse to wear masks, all I know is if there's a war, I don't want to be in a foxhole with those people. Because I need to know that there are people who are willing to do the smallest thing to help protect us all. And if you're not willing to do that, then, you're in the short term, your liberty will be protected, but in the long term, we're all in a lot more trouble.
Well,
because
just
of-
like with climate change, they both deny that there is a need to wear a mask because of liberty. They also say the science says the masks don't work, right? Which is baloney, but there they go. Once again, there's a corner of this climate change science that says, oh, it's a mistake. Bjorn Lomborg and all those denier scientists, they'll always be around, just like the moonshot and the climate, the
I
Holocaust.
don't know if we can persuade everybody. Let's look at some of the others. Laura asked me to encourage participants to email their city council with public comments to take a stand on climate change on the basis of human rights of future generations. I like this suggestion a lot because the history of environmentalism in this country has mostly been good people asking less good people to do good things. And you can try to persuade them. I mean, you can try to appeal to their sense of morality or patriotism or whatever else you want. And it'll work maybe for a while. Environmentalism has a long history in this country and a lot of successes. What I like about rights, though, I want to make this a rights thing, a human rights thing. You know why? Because rights add some teeth to that argument. If you don't do it, I'm going to sue you for violating my human rights. That's why I think it's important to think of climate change and protecting the environment in terms of rights, environmental human rights, because they have teeth. You can take people to court, they're part of law, and human rights are the language of international law today. They have been since 1950.
So Dr. Hiskis, I would counter your argument by, I'm the guy that wrote the automobile question.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Yeah.
And my thing, I'm an economics guy, economics major, and a financial guy, and I'm very concerned about deficit spending, and that being us violating human rights of my granddaughters and their peers, spending ourselves into a hole. It's undeniable, in my opinion, that anybody would say we're not deficit spending right now. I'm talking about the United States only, and no
I'm sure that we're not what?
We're not. No one would deny that we are deficit spending.
Oh, right, of course.
That's just an irrefutable fact. The question is, my solution would be, we raise or double or triple everybody's taxes and have so we can balance the budget and repay the national debt. Now, not everybody agrees that that's a good idea, but it is, by your logic, that would be something that we're violating the human rights of future generations by running up in this time a deficit that they will have to pay back.
It's a fair question. I think it's a good point. And I basically would say, I don't run from the fact that we're going to raise people's taxes, to pay for climate change mitigation. I mean, the Trump administration had a $2 trillion tax cut, which all the Republicans thought was wonderful. And now that he's no longer president, they're talking about deficit spending again. What a horrible thing it is. Well, come on. Without the $2 trillion tax cut, which, by the way, I didn't get, I don't know, maybe some of you did. It mostly went to very wealthy people. Without that, we wouldn't be in a bigger hole as we are. But you're right. It's gonna cost money to do this. I don't know if I agree. All economists don't agree about how dangerous deficits are. I think your case is an important one. Leaving future generations with a gigantic deficit also is subjecting them to at least risk and maybe harm. At the risk of sounding too much like someone who wants the government to take your money, I think you're right that taxes are going to have to be raised. We have the lowest taxes in the world for a developed country. We're all old enough to remember when the highest tax bracket was 60% under Eisenhower. In fact, during the war, the Second World War, the highest tax bracket was 90%. Reagan lowered it to 35 and the Trump administration lowered it to 21. Why are there so many billionaires? Well, that's why.
Well, one thing we didn't point out is that the COVID crisis has reduced our climate gases for the first time in human history.
I know, it's
So
amazing.
Not
Yeah.
going to work is a good idea, and Zooming to do everything you needed to do to be productive is probably the idea that has reached a climax today in COVID times.
It's
and we will
interesting,
do
although I'd
this
much-
more and more to reduce climate gases.
Although, Tom, I'd much rather be together with you having a cup of coffee or a beer, even though that would, that diminishes some of the benefit.
We
But
also
it is
show
so
we can
ironic
spend money
that-
to protect ourselves from an existential threat. COVID is an existential
I
threat that
agree with that.
destroys our economy. Well, so is climate change. So watch out when the sea level rises 25 feet. We're in big trouble.
Yeah, Tom puts that in the chat too, that everybody can see. I would agree that climate change is an existential threat. In a way that a third world war would be an existential threat. We'd be willing to make the sacrifices necessary to win the next war? I would be. I'm reading right now this book about Churchill called the what's it called? The something in the vial. Carol?
The splendid
in the vial, and it's amazing what the British put up with in the years before the United States entered the war, and they did it without too much complaint.
I know, and that was my
Are
thought.
people still capable of that kind of sacrifice in the name of the public good? I think we are,
think
but
our
I agree with
nonfiction-
Tom that it's an existential crisis. It's going to take a lot. We're not talking about a few tax hikes here. We're talking about a lot.
I believe our
Which will
nonfiction
probably
book-
affect the organization of the economy. Everything.
I think if you took a poll of everybody under 30, though, they would all agree we got a huge problem here. It's only us old guys who have to dedicate a few assets to some Green New Deal that have a
Yeah,
problem.
but I don't see any young people in here. Actually, mostly us old guys here.
That's
so-
because this is a half
hope
of
for
senior
us, yeah.
professionals. Sorry, we're excluding all the young people here. They don't get to sign up.
Well, I can tell you, as someone who's started a couple of human rights programs, the kids today, college students today are just wild for this stuff. I mean, they are so motivated to take this on, and not to keep pitching my next book, which will be available in fine bookstores everywhere in by July or August.
And what is the title of the next book?
It's called Suffer the Children.
Suffer the Children. Okay.
But I mean, it's just so amazing if you take the time to look. It's not just Malala and Greta Thunberg and David Hogg. There are an extraordinary number of young activists, and I mean 10 years old and even younger, around the world who are deeply engaged in saving the climate. And they're having an impact. They convince their parents first, then they convince some local politician, and then pretty soon they've got, a few thousand people marching behind them. We don't have that kind of energy anymore, but these young people are willing to do it. And I'm actually very hopeful. Maybe I'm too optimistic, but I just think that, in my acknowledgments to the book, I said many of the people that I owe a huge debt of acknowledgement to in writing this book are people I've never met, also their children. And it's really true. There are so many inspiring stories in India and Pakistan and Latin America and Western Europe and in the United States of kids being willing to put themselves out there and demand some change. And I think it'll happen because that generation wants it. Eventually.
I just
build
wanted to
up.
say, Richard, that I think it's this month, and for all of you still on the call, that Nonfiction Books is discussing the book Splendid in the Vial. So
Oh, really?
if you're not
Great
registered
book.
for that, they will be discussing that.
Mike, got
Um,
something quick? We got a few minutes left, I think.
Yes. What are today's political parties' positions on climate change? Can you briefly comment on
Well,
that?
I think the Democrats are much more open to embracing the sacrifices, but it's changing, it's moving. I mean, I think President Trump was an outlier in his own party in denying that it exists. Most Republicans I know also agree with General Motors, and Ford Motor Company that yes, it's real, we got to do something about it. I mean, you know, the 1,000 cities and towns in America who are declaring themselves sustainability cities, those aren't just Democrats doing it. Those are Republicans too, because it requires a vote of the
And try
town
to find
council.
anybody in the Fortune 500 who doesn't have a climate committee or a sustainability officer. Everybody in corporate America.
It's so obvious today, isn't it, Mike, that the when you think about the Republicans or Democrats in Washington, they are completely different from Democrats and Republicans in the rest of the country. I mean, I don't want to be too cynical here. I just said I'm very optimistic, but I am so sick and tired of our elected officials, at least at the national level and some state levels, who just not being willing to acknowledge the obvious truth and start doing something about it. They see too much benefit in denying it or embracing it or accusing the other side of denying it. They just see, this is how I'm going to get reelected, so I'm going to do it. That's going to have to change, and it will change.
Well, it's a time for technology leadership, not denying all the opportunities that lie ahead. So I think they're very short-sighted, and history will show them to be complete and total idiots.
Well, I think that we live in an age of denial to a certain extent. I mean, that's what this whole talk was about, right? But I think that there are people younger than us who live in an age of acceptance and who want to do something about, stop denying, accept that it's real, and do something about it. And I think that that's where the hope lies. You know, it's when I have one little anecdote from when I was at UConn. The university invited Mia Farrow. Do you know her? She's a famous actress who used to be married to Woody Allen.
Rosemary's Baby.
She came to, they wanted to hit her up for millions of dollars for the theater department, of course, right? My students knew who she was, even though they'd never seen any of those movies, because they knew that she's this huge human rights activist in the third world. And so I was originally invited to the lunch with her, with the president and the provost. And then a week before the lunch, I was uninvited for some reason. I didn't know why. So I didn't get to meet her until I was in the hallway outside the Human Rights Institute. And here comes the dean of the music school with Mia Farrow. And she says, "What is this?" I said, "It's the Human Rights Institute. We would have loved to have you come and talk to us." And she immediately said, "You know, I didn't get to talk to any students at all. These are the people I want to talk to. I have absolutely no faith in my generation doing anything worthwhile. Why can't I talk to the human rights students?" I said, "Come back and I guarantee you'll be able to talk to the human rights students." And meanwhile, there's the dean and the provost listening to her say this, that, you know, why did we have this boring lunch instead of having some students around and really change things? I think that feeling is out there. And even when, you know, I talk to congressmen and senators about what they really think, they believe it too. You know, they want to honor the activism of young people today. It would help if young people voted in greater numbers than they do. Believe me, that would really help. That changed a little bit this past election, maybe not enough.
We're going to see some big changes coming, though, particularly with cars and batteries now that are lasting for a long time. We've learned in the past about the future where people won't own cars, but cars, you'll just call up and somebody will come and pick you up and take you where you want to go and that sort of thing. A big thing, Zoom meetings now are having a big effect, and people are getting used to them. In corporations now, companies are downsizing the amount of space they are renting out. Commercial real estate industry is going to take a dive because of that. But I know my son, his company is now looking at how to cut office space down because they will be using Zoom meetings for a lot of their stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the pandemic might end up being a real watershed moment in
absolutely
in history that we realize we can do things differently.
Yeah, I think the pictures shown from space, as soon as we stop driving and the environment was so much cleaner, should be a lesson to and an easy sell to people take care of our environment.
I like the pictures of deer and buffalo wandering through city streets in various cities in America, just because there aren't any cars around. And, you know, that makes me a little nervous too. I got too many deer in my backyard. You know,
We all do.
yeah, I know. But I do think that there might be a silver lining in the pandemic, and that would be it, that we realize we can live without certain things. And those things cost a lot in terms of resources and environmental health.
The other
Yeah.
thing that the pandemic seems to do is that because of our collective misery, we're having to work together and, you know, with one another.
Yeah.
So I think it's
No,
bringing.
I
us
agree.
together.
You know, that's why politicians always try to say it's a war that we're in, to try to encourage that kind of collective effort. Doesn't always work. I think that it has worked to some extent. I agree. When I lived during most of the year in Grand Rapids. We have a cottage in Holland, so I'm in Holland in the summer. But you know, I go back and forth just to check on things, and I'm amazed when I go to Holland, downtown Holland. Everybody's wearing a mask. You know, outside, inside, everywhere. That's not true in Grand Rapids. You know, but it's possible. And it just seems to be the collective culture, the cooperative culture in Holland right now. I don't know if you people are all in Holland or not, but they're going to do it. And you know, it is an infringement. It's a pain in the neck to have to wear a mask, but in some places, people just voluntarily do it, and it helps. I probably shouldn't say this, but my wife and I are going to Sanibel, Florida in a month or so for a couple of weeks. And I've been checking on the COVID situation there. And from the day that it started, the mayor of Sanibel ordered a public emergency. Everybody had to wear masks all the time if they were outside. Sanibel is part of a county that's had a huge number of COVID cases. The total number on Sanibel on the island is 202 for the entire pandemic, 202 cases. It is really possible to alleviate this if people would do just some things.
I think an interesting thing in Holland here is our conversion of the electrical plant from coal to gas. People are really proud of it. And not only that, the effect it's having nationally when people are looking at us to see how we did it. You know,
No, I agree.
what we're doing with our streets, heated streets.
I've always thought Holland, I mean, I lived in New England for most of my adult life, and in Storrs, Connecticut, where the university was, they were trying to build a downtown. And I said, everybody should go to Holland, Michigan and see what they did. You know, they heated the sidewalks, they gave free parking to everybody. You know, if you want people to come downtown, if you do those two things, you'd be amazed how many businesses will follow and how many customers will follow if you do that. Although my wife will tell you, who's part of the Holland Climate Collaborative, that natural gas is an improvement, but it's not enough. Holland should be moving towards, you know, non-fossil fuel energy. And the town council is reluctant because they said, look, we just built this beautiful new thing. We're done. You know, and on the lakeshore, of course, it's heated by coal. There's a huge, the Port Sheldon power plant is coal. Yeah. And if you drive by it, you can't see the mountains of coal that are there, but they're there. And, you know, that really needs to change too. So.
It is 11:07, so I just want to give, we've lost quite a few people already, which is fine because that 11 o'clock hour hits and they're on to their next task of the
Cookies,
day.
they're ready for cookies.
I guess, I don't know, but I just wanted to make sure that Carol has a chance to say thank you. And I want to say thank you to everyone for, I guess, demonstrating one of our pillars of civil discourse this morning, which is the humility to listen. I think we all enter these classes and these subjects with different viewpoints. And sometimes we can walk away and ask ourselves if we were wrong or are we right, and keep doing your homework and listening and informing yourself and evolving. So I'm grateful for that. Carol, would you like to wrap up for us?
Well, thank you. It was great. And I loved having the question and answer, the openness. It was a very good session, and our HASP members are excellent thinkers. So thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
all very much for coming. I really appreciate it. Thank you for being willing to put yourself out there and participating. That's the way I like to roll too, rather than just keep talking. Academics are the worst listeners, as Kim just said. So you gotta say something if you want us to shut up and listen. I really hope to see you again. I'm probably going to join HASS myself just because I like these things. And I believe I'm doing another one in the fall, hopefully in person when my book comes out. It'll be on the human rights of children. So I hope to see you again. Great group.
Yeah,
Thanks.
my comment is that the world is a changing